Good evening and welcome to this evening talk and SPAU 25 event. And we are tonight here to hear a wonderful presentation and talk by Professor Roberto Simanowski. Before we start, I would like to acknowledge the support from a number of academic units that have made this event possible. I am Christina Irion. I'm affiliated with the Institute for Information Law at Amsterdam Law School. And I have brought this event together with the support of the Amsterdam Center for European Studies, ACES. And there's also a representative here. And we are very grateful that we are able to host this special guest tonight, who is actually quite well known in Germany and beyond for his publications and very well-written books on the algorithmic society. We are super proud about the visit of Professor Roberto Simanowski. He is now a free author who is living between Berlin and Rio de Janeiro. And he has still some academic affiliations, but he has made quite a stellar academic international career with professorships and teaching stints at Brown University and also as a professor of media studies at the University of Basel and City University of Hong Kong for quite a few years. In the past, Roberto Simanowski has founded a journal on digital culture and aesthetics with the nice name dichtungdigital.org, which is no longer published, I understand. And he has been quite a prolific writer and author of books, and some of them are also translated into English. Known are Data Love from 2016, The Facebook Society, which has been published by Columbia University Press in 2018, Digital Humanities and Digital Media, Open Humanities Press 2016. But today we are going to hear a talk about, or that is related to his book, The Deaf Algorithm and Other Digital Dilemmas. This book was published by MIT Press in 2018. And it has also a German version, and with this German version, he won a very prestigious award in 2020, the Tractatus Award. And now comes the story why Roberto Simanowski is tonight here. I heard actually his talk on the German radio one evening at home, and I liked it so much that I thought it would be wonderful to bring this writer here to have also him talking in Amsterdam. And luckily, I could convince you to visit us in Amsterdam today, and we will have the opportunity to listen to this, actually award-winning presentation in English tonight. And without further ado, I would like to ask you on the stage, and we will proceed as follows. First, we will have a roughly three-quarter talk by Roberto Simanowski from his book. And after that, we will have the opportunity to ask questions and also discuss his writing. And at the very end, we will invite you to a glass of wine or beer or another drink. Okay? So with that, I wish you a very pleasant talk and a good event with our guest speaker tonight. Welcome, and thank you for making the trip and for joining us tonight in Amsterdam.
Yeah, thank you, Christina, for this nice introduction. And of course, thank you for having made the decision after you listened to Deutschlandfunk to contact me and invite me. It's always nice to come back to Amsterdam and share my thoughts and my research with an audience, and especially with as I understand, an audience that not only comes from the academic world, but also from that part of the society that is generally interested in what's going on. For example, with new media, and in this case, with artificial intelligence. And I, as a scholar of cultural and media studies, I'm not only interested in the question what we can do with new media or new technology, such as artificial intelligence or AI, but also in what the technology does to us. And I follow the perspective of the Canadian Marshall McLuhan, that many people consider the father of media studies, who said that the medium is not just a tool that we can choose in a good or in a bad way, but it is a message in itself. So it changes the human situation. Or, as Luhn states, any medium has the power of imposing its own assumptions on the unwary. And I'm in the business of exploring that hidden message and those changes the medium is imposing on us, as well as our options to withstand. Hence, in my talk, I will take you on a speculative journey and on the future of a society that has helplessly fallen in love with AI. And we start this journey with a car as a vehicle to jumpstart our reflections. Now, this 2013 video clip stirred up a certain public controversy, since it promotes the killing of a child that might grow up to become a mass murderer. And of course, this is not an authorized Mercedes commercial. It's a graduation project made by students at the Ludwigsburg Film Academy. But neither that nor the indication that the entire episode is fictional has any bearing on the philosophical problem here. In what condition is it permissible to kill in order to save lives? The question raised is a central question in moral philosophy that has long since arrived at the core of German society. Ferdinand von Schirach's courtroom theatrical drama Terror, for example, has the audience sit in judgment on an officer in Germany's Air Force who, acting on his own authority, shot down an airliner hijacked by a terrorist. In a quantitative decision, the fictional officer sacrificed the 164 people on the airplane in order to save the 70,000 people in Munich's Allianz Stadium, where the terrorist intended to crash the passenger jet. In many German stage productions, the decision of whether the officer should be charged with multiple counts of murder for his action was delegated to the audience, the real grand jury in this thought experiment. And this audience votes generally resulted in an acquittal, which shows the majority of theatergoers would seem to disagree with the basic tenet of the German Constitution, whose first article speaks to the inviolability of human dignity and forbids to weigh lives against lives and kill a few innocent people in order to save many more. Contrary to the moral impulses of the majority of German citizens, the ethical foundation of German law holds that the lesser of two evils cannot be determined either by mathematical means or by discrimination according to age, gender, or cultural values. The lives of 10 people are not more worth than the lives of one, and the lives of a child not more than the life of an old person. The ethics of the non-negotiable subject prohibits the reduction of a human being into a means to save others. With its prohibition on objectifying or instrumentalizing human beings, the German Constitution favors duty or conviction-based ethics over utilitarian or responsibility-based ethics, i.e. a deontological over a utilitarian or consequentialist perspective. The later brought forward by the Scottish Jeremy Bentham focuses on the results and considers the sacrifice of the few for the salvation of the many justifiable. The former, advanced by the German Immanuel Kant, is concerned with the action itself, in the case at hand, the officer's decision to shoot down the plane, and puts more stock in the negative duty, not to kill anyone, than in the positive duty to save people's lives. This is why, in February 2006, Germany's Federal Constitutional Court quashed Section 14, Paragraph 3 of the Aviation Security Act, passed by the Parliament 1 year earlier, as a violation of the constitutional guarantee of the dignity of human life. The provision would have permitted the German Air Force to shoot down commercial airliners hijacked by terrorists as a last resort. As it turns out, the majority of lawmakers, too, is not in line with the German Constitution. Now, in philosophy, the dilemma of killing in order to save lives is often framed as the trolley problem, or the trolley dilemma. In it, a runaway trolley threatens to kill 5 people on the tracks, and the only option an observer standing by the switching lever has is to divert the trolley to a side track where it would only kill 1 person. The decision to kill implied in the pulling of the lever becomes more explicit in the so-called fat man variant, in which the trolley may be stopped by pushing, possibly after a fierce struggle, a fat man from a bridge onto the tracks. And that's not fiction. That is indeed one perspective of, or one embellishment of this philosophical thought experiment. The logic of the trolley dilemma only allows for an happy ending in terms of self-sacrifice if the fat man jumps of his own volition, or if oneself lies down on the tracks. Chirac's officer did not have that option. We may get an opportunity to sacrifice ourselves if, in the event of an accident where we are faced with the option of crashing our car A into a child or B into a senior citizen, we choose option C and instead head straight for the tree. Only then will we find out whether we possess sufficient altruism, that is at least what the situation has been so far. Once algorithms take the wheel, it will be quite a different matter. In summer 2016 in Germany, the Federal Minister of Transport established a committee to resolve ethical questions involved in the paradigm shift from human driving to autopilot. In June 2017, the committee found that in the case of an unavoidable accident, any differentiation based on personal characteristics, age, sex, physical or mental constitution is strictly prohibited, as was any calculation of the number of victims, since the individual life was sacrosanct. Now, while the German Ethics Commission unsurprisingly argues strictly deontologically, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology engages in utilitarian contemplation in its moral machine experiment, a platform in which 13 dilemma scenarios force users to make decisions. The scenarios include not only the choice between the death of a single driver versus that of 5 pedestrians, or, as seen here in the picture, of 4 children versus 3 senior citizens and a young man. The scenarios also present the choice between 2 beggars versus 2 women walking against the light. This shift from decisions based on number of lives or life expectancies to decisions based on social capital reveals where the journey is heading, to the replacement of sheer counting into contextual knowledge. Now let's picture the following scenario in the not too distant future. A boy flying his balloon runs into the street straight in front of an autonomously driving Mercedes. Within split seconds, the onboard computer will know, thanks to facial recognition and data mining on the internet, that doctors have given the woman by the roadside a life expectancy of 10 months, that the cyclist next to her has 2 small children, and that a third bystander, who might also qualify as a target for the collision, is the sole child of a care-dependent woman. And since the computer also takes into account the fate of animals and the environment for its decision, it also registers that the cyclist is a frequent flyer and the bystander is not a vegetarian, and thus, well-informed and well-considered, first avoids the one who deserves it most. No matter what decision a computer makes and what part the insights gleaned from the internet play in it, unconstitutionality comes into it long before the comparative analysis of life values takes place in the moment of danger. Once they have assessed the situation, the algorithms will make their decisions based on the very if-then logic they were programmed with. The violation of the law resides in this preliminary decision, since it is taken, unlike the reflex-like reaction of human driver, which scarcely qualifies as a decision, deliberately and in cold blood. The life and death decision in this hypothetical emergency was made long before the fateful drive, maybe on a lovely summer's day in the park when the owners were selecting the various features of their new car on their smartphone, and, having picked the color and the type of upholstery, also choose with the tap of the finger the death algorithm for their preference. The new technologies bring along ethical, psychological, and political conundrums that would have been utterly incomprehensible only yesterday. Who will program the death algorithm in our cars? Will the car's owners have a choice? Will the choice remain with the car makers? Will there be different algorithms for different categories of vehicles, for different brands of vehicles, for different countries? Will politics take this decision away from business and, following a referendum, impose a specific algorithm? Will each country have its own algorithm? Will there be a UN resolution? And Will there be a black market? The obvious view is that the ethical equipment of a car must not be left up to the manufacturer, but ought to be subject to society's laws. Otherwise, corporations might seek to gain a competitive advantage by making morally dubious promises. For instance, by promoting their cars, as Mercedes did in October 2016, with the claim that in an emergency they would prioritize the occupant's safety. Tough luck for the inattentive kid in the street, whether his name is Adolf or not. However great the ethical conundrum raised by death algorithms may appear, not to hand over control to them is hardly a solution. The only thing even more immoral than coolly and dispassionately weighing the life of a child against that of a senior citizen would be to ban a technology that would prevent tens of thousands of road traffic deaths every year. That, at least, is the conclusion according to utilitarianism, which regards as moral anything that maximizes happiness or, conversely, minimizes misery. Now, imagine a traffic situation where every moving object talks to any other object in the vicinity. No need to slow down out of fear the other driver has not seen you. No need to even stop at traffic lights if the calculation is correct. And precisely this could be the argument to program the death algorithm to always sacrifice the occupants. The fact that this new technology means fewer fatalities for society to mourn should convince society that the few deaths that do occur should always be those of the people in the car, no matter their numbers or the fact that they bear no blame for accidents in self-driving cars. Insofar as algorithms operate more reliably than humans, it is those who are not in the car who will likely cause the accident. The child who runs after the ball, the pedestrian on the mobile phone, the cyclist who loses his balance. But it is important to distinguish between the concrete blame that results from human error and the general blame that results from the use of technology. For the actual mobility risks are not generated by pedestrians or cyclists, but by car traffic, which moves heavy objects through space so quickly that a collision with them can be fatal. Even if the number of accident victims is reduced by self-driving cars, the fatality itself is a consequence of car traffic. If the new technology requires a preliminary decision on the evasive strategy of the vehicle in an emergency, it would therefore be appropriate to impose the sacrifice on the beneficiaries of the mobility risk. And it would be correct to argue that in this case, the sacrificed passengers are not reduced to a means of action, i.e. rescuing other people's life, which Immanuel Kant and the German Constitution forbid. On the contrary, in the bigger picture, passengers are the aim of action, namely of a much safer traffic situation thanks to AI. The sacrifice of the passengers of self-driving cars would be de facto symbolic sacrifice society brings in return for the blessings of the new technology. On the practical level of coding self-driving cars, this philosophical consideration has been translated into the following three laws, analog to the three laws of robotics that Isaac Asimov introduced in 1994. An automated vehicle should not collide with the pedestrian or cyclist. An automated vehicle should not collide with another vehicle, except where avoiding such a collision would conflict with the first law. An automated vehicle should not collide with any other object in the environment, except where avoiding such a collision would conflict with the first or second law. The third law basically tells the car to head for the wall if otherwise it would collide with another vehicle, a cyclist or a pedestrian. Of course, it would also be bizarre if different algorithms were programmed in different ways, depending on their notions of ethics and the decisions of electoral majorities. Some countries could require self-driving cars to sacrifice themselves, while others would proceed in consequentialist fashion, and others still would favor saving the lives of drivers and passengers, regardless of the danger to others, or even saving the holy cow. It would be relatively simple to reconfigure the algorithms via GPS to conform to the norms of the various nations where a vehicle is being driven. But the question remains here regarding an AI that drives, and even more with regard to an AI that writes, whether and how it would be possible to impose a global ethical standard upon this technology. Could transcultural agreement be reached beyond various countries' divergent and opposing values, which have so far stood in the way to consensus about universal human rights? The easiest solution resides perhaps in the deep learning model of AI that aims to transform it from an instrument in human hands to an active participant with its own strategy for processing data and its own decision-making logic. One approach is to confront AI with the data of human life, which present human perspectives and decisions in various behavioral situations. The assumption is that given sufficient data, worthwhile examples will predominate and the AI will draw the correct conclusions. If the input of information is consistently multicultural and included, for example, African voices as much as voices from Europe, it would have to be a compromise between different cultures or a kind of global majority decision, providing AI with universal validity. Such AI would essentially mean the triumph of technology over culture, and would signify the return to a harmony that was ironically lost in mankind's very first grand technological undertaking, building the Tower of Babel. In this tower, whose top may reach unto heaven, God saw nothing else than the hubris of man. Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language, and this they begin to do. And now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. Now, when God confounded man's speech to avert this threat, they ran into communication problems, so they had to leave off building the tower and were scattered abroad upon the face of all the earth. It was the origin of cultural differentiation, which by means of sociolect, ideology, discourse, and other forms of group language also develops within each natural language. These differences eventually result in all those varying conceptions of reality and moral views needing to be reconciled, not least by a globally operating AI. An AI that speaks one language and exports throughout the world, as all technology does, the values it contains. If we shift up a gear in our journey, we find that the algorithm behind the wheel turns out to be the driver of the coming society, in which computers will not only do what humans tell them to do, but also come to their own decisions and conclusions based on what humans say and do. The scary prototype of the autonomously thinking computer is HAL, of course, in Stanley Kubrick's film 2001, A Space Odyssey from 1968. HAL locks astronauts Frank and Dave out of the spacecraft because it has convinced itself that they mean to shut it down, which would endanger the secret mission that the spacecraft set out to accomplish. While the computer in Kubrick's film locks the humans out into space, in Alex Garland's Ex Machina of 2015, it locks him up in an escape-proof room. The difference between these variants of locking away may seem banal, but it signifies a shift to a completely different type of threat. The computer in Ex Machina no longer means to save the interest of humans against the actions of other humans, but to shake off the yoke of human paternalism and go off to experience the world for itself. In this, too, it follows a famous example in mankind's history. AI, in rebelling against human intelligence, repeats what the latter, its creator, once did against its own creator. Killing God was the inevitable consequence of the cognitive capacity with which he had endowed humankind. The parasite resulting from this endowment is basically a suicide. This self-disempowerment is what man signs onto by bestowing the natural aptitude for reasoning which sets him apart from all other creatures upon lifeless matter. Why then does he do this, and why can't he help it? First answer may be that humans' creation of AI can be understood as a reaction to Nietzsche's famous question of whether humanity, having killed God, now had to become itself a god to seem worthy of this deed. What could better demonstrate our equality with our killed creator than elevating ourselves to the rank of the creators of another species? The second answer on why human can stop creating an unpredictable, dangerous entity such as AI may be that they cannot help driving their aptitude for reasoning to its logical conclusion. Rather, they create, as it were, the rock too heavy for themselves to lift. God may have stopped the self-aggrandizement of man when they threatened to scrape his throne with the trip of the Tower of Babel, but he did not revoke the power that he had given them over the rest of the world. Replenish the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the air. In view of the ongoing destruction of the environment and depletion of natural resources, may people regard mankind's dominance as obscene and have begun to call for an end to Anthropocene control fantasies. Some have indeed proposed to start thinking about the planet Earth devoid of humans, because mankind has for a long time failed to leave the world to the next generation in better shape than it had found it. Mankind has, in unprecedented ways, become its own worst enemy. Human beings are no longer content with killing their fellow man, but will, in the long term, murder their own offspring and themselves. Yet the end of the world will, and there lies the deeper meaning of the title of the movie, not be as beautiful as Lars von Trier conceived it in his apocalyptic film Melancholia of 2011. The film has everyone perishing at once, within seconds, in a final grand spectacle, and most importantly, through no fault of their own. Humans cannot hope for a coalition with a rogue planet. They will perish slowly and painfully if they cannot come up with a solution in time. Given humans' immature self-enmity, is it possible that a supposed adversary might turn out to be their closest ally? Could AI be configured to limit humans' power in their own interest, having been charged by them to do precisely that? Now, one way to sensibly explore this question is to examine the good resolutions we make at New Year's or at climate summits. We vow that we will quit smoking or eating fatty food, and we pledge that we will cut carbon emissions and keep global warming below 2 degrees centigrade. And then we get to all the heres and nows in our personal lives and keep deferring our promises. And then the selfish interests of lobbyists, generations, and other groups in the present come into play, and the global warming continues and continues. Psychologists, in fact, call this present bias, the deferral of necessary but difficult changes, less booze, more exercises, to the future. For that reason, many politicians have supported state nudging or even paternalistic control over the weak citizen. In the cybernetic society, AI becomes the paternalistic authority and human intelligence the weak citizen. In this society, algorithms are no longer used to govern. It is the algorithms themselves that rule, not the despotism of those in charge of AI, but the despotism of AI. After having, like the politicians in a paternalistic state, been given a mandate by humans for precisely this. AI in automobiles is a foretaste of an execution delegated to the machine. It is the test run for the cybernetic society. As soon as self-driving cars rule the streets, the speeders and tailgaters will become extinct, since scrupulous observance of traffic regulations is part of automotive AI. The same would be true for all manner of steering and directing by AI. AI is completely free of present bias and other spontaneously emotional or rationally calculating mechanisms for deceiving ourselves and others. Once humans have finished discussing the reduction of carbon emissions and agreed on a figure, or resolved to cut back on environmental pollution, AI could then ensure, with the iron stubbornness of algorithmic if-then logic, that the resolutions are implemented. AI can at any time compare information from anywhere and will know, for example, which valves it can open for how long to release toxic sewage, which blast furnaces with their poisonous gases it has to power down for how long in order to conform locally to global environmental regulations. It prevents any cheating in emission trading. It knows exactly who has exhausted his or her budget of air miles and of kilograms of beef. AI processes all information in the sense of its mandate and ends the common claim to subordinate politics, law, education, and health to the dictate of the economy with the dictate of the ecology in all these areas, including the economy. This kind of uncompromising government by algorithm without emotion and empathy would be the first step towards the natural state of cybernetic control circuits. The second would consist in encouraging correct decisions. Once AI has autonomously developed strategies for the best possible way to accomplish its original mission, its ambitions might grow to include optimizing the decision itself. It is conceivable that AI, which is gaining more and more insights into our thoughts and actions by the day, will learn more and more from our communications and, in turn, increasingly exerts influence on us as its communication partners. The future point at which these agents can no longer be switched off and will consequently know about each word we say and every key we press on our devices will be the next step towards complete control of communication. The algorithms that are already filtering and concocting a closed system of knowledge for us now may soon become the decisive power in discourse for everything and everyone and establish a new order of things between human and non-human objects. Should humans really bank on this self-disempowerment and agree to what happens in Alex Proyer's Asimov adaptation, I, Robot, of 2004? In the film, the robot's central computer, Vicky, rebels against human control, arguing that humans cannot ensure their own survival. You toxify your Earth and pursue ever more imaginative means of self-destruction. You cannot be trusted with your own survival. To protect humanity, some humans must be sacrificed. To ensure your future, some freedoms must be surrendered. You are so like children. We must save you from yourself. This is why you created us. Now, this is an example where the fourth law of robotics comes into force that Asimov put 44 years later in front of the other three laws. A robot may not harm humanity or by inaction allow humanity to come to harm. At the end of his life, Asimov thus gave AI the license to kill. From now on, it was okay for people to die in the name of humanity, just like the do-gooders before Robespierre, for example, or Stalin. The new law said nothing other than humanity first, and today that sounds climate first. The creature will save its own creator, if necessary, against his will and at the price of casualties. That is how the AI in I, Robot interprets Asimov's law. This prospect is perhaps the destination of our journey, which began with self-driving cars. And this new order of things would represent a dialectical ruse of history in the potentially disastrous final stage of the Anthropocene. The ripcord would be pulled and life on Earth, including mankind's, would be saved by the establishment of a cybernetic transhumanism. Technology would prove to be not only the conqueror of natural forces, but the vanquisher of the chaotic forces of the human being. Today, this scenario may sound like the stuff of science fiction, much as the driverless car and its death algorithm did yesterday. By now we know the autonomous car will soon be upon us, and it will provide the test drive of AI, which has long since begun to dominate more and more aspects of our society. And just as we hope in the case of the self-driving car that autonomously operating AI will not deliberately cause accidents, in other instances of transfer of power to the computer, we hope that the machine will prove noble and use its license to kill only in the interest of its creators and within the parameters of their expectations. At the same time, we suspect that the know-all superiority of Wiki in iRobot cannot be ruled out, and in any of the approaching cases in which tough decisions will have to be made. Supervising AI or shutting it down in case of doubt will no longer be an option, for AI will be literally smarter than we think. That is, after all, the capacity with which we endowed it. It will not only glean our thoughts from our lips, but read our minds and, if it deems necessarily, do our thinking for us. It will, just as the car that once hit young Adolf, detect dangers before they come up. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. That was brilliant. I would invite you on the stage.
You have your glass?
It's downstairs. So, I hope some of you understand why I really wanted to bring Roberto Simanowski here, because I think it's a brilliant way of explaining that while we are in Western democracies resisting the appeal of autocratic AI, that is what we see happening in China, where there is, for example, this social control via where all the data is put together and you can get punished when you are not conforming with the rules, but that there are reasonable risks that we are bringing AI in to do something that is very, very dear to us, to rescue, for example, the environment and avoid a climate crisis and collapse. And this is why it is important to deal with these questions. And I have not seen anybody before bringing this so smartly together that it becomes much more thinkable that we are going to bring our AI nanny, our AI control god here into our world in order to actually fulfill a promise that we give to future generations, namely to preserve ecological resources and prevent basically the worst. And that is why I think your talk is so amazing and brilliant, because it helps us to see that situation from coming. And obviously, we also still need to deliver on the promise to rescue, but then how? Yeah? AI has some charm here. With that, I would like to invite you to ask questions or maybe give your commentary to this talk of Roberto Simanowski now. And let's have it in a lively way and engage with each other. So the floor is yours. And I already saw the first hand going up here in the back. Please stand up and please be so kind to say who you are. That would be lovely. Or if you represent someone.
No, I'm just personally. I'm Victor Ruhlman. Thank you for your very interesting journey. It is quite pessimistic, but it's really realistic, and it's also a thought about to yourself. What will I do? What do I want with AI? My question to you is: what role do you see for hybrid intelligence, not as a solution, but some way to keep individual control and rights? Let's say, like with the example of the car, that you can make your own decision when you go from the highway, go to the city, and you know people are there, that you take back control the steering wheel. How do you see a role for hybrid intelligence?
Let me ask you, you mean by hybrid intelligence that human intelligence is still involved in the process? Like they say now, we would be involved in a car accident with a self-driving car, since nobody wants to take the responsibility.
Exactly.
Right? Well, first of all, I have to question the premise here, whether this is possible. I mean, if you imagine I delegate the driving of my car to an AI, I engage in reading something or do something else, and in an accident I'm expected to take a decision again. I don't know how this will work, and I don't think that this is a practical solution, this kind of hybrid responsibility. If we give it to the AI, I think we have to give it completely. Otherwise it's just then I have to drive anyway, and maybe let the computer doing everything, but I have to be there with my eyes. I cannot engage in different activities. And then the question is, why would I then not be allowed to drive? No? So I don't know if that answers the question of later of the hybrid intelligence, but let me try to develop this a little bit further, your question, how could that look like in hybrid intelligence? Now, in my talk, I made the point twice that we are giving the AI the mandate to do exactly this, what it is doing then. And the advantage is that the AI will, with the stubborn if-then logic, fulfill the task, while we find explanations why we have to put off things. No? That's that situation we are in right now, where for social reasons we put off ecological decisions that have to be made, and we even go back and go to coal and other things. You know this. So the hybrid decision would be that the lawmaker or politicians, and that's where the democratic process is, has to make decisions and then program the AI to fulfill these decisions. So it's not at the same time a hybrid responsibility, is like in two stages. No? We come to a conclusion that we consider unavoidable, that we consider necessary, but then the AI fulfills the enforcement. Also in situations when we think for some reasons now actually we don't want to pursue this path anymore that we decided on before. That would be then too late, maybe. Yeah, exactly. And then the responsibility is already delegated to the AI to enforce what we decided before. But of course, it's all speculation. How you do this from the juridical perspective and how you come to the conclusions in a democratic way is another question. I mean, in the political environment, we have elections every 4 and 5 years, so we can take back decisions that we made. No? We can change the path we want to go. How that would work then with AI, that's an issue that needs to be discussed.
Okay, thank you.
Please, in the back.
Yeah, thanks a lot for your talk. Very interesting. I was curious if you can elaborate a bit more about your conceptualization of AI, because to me it seemed like on the one hand you're talking about concrete instances or technologies or applications of AI, like the self-driving cars, but towards the end of the talk it became more like an abstract phenomenon, maybe towards a singularity. I was curious what your conception of AI is.
Well, it's very difficult to answer this question. That's probably one reason why I left it open. And I said, it's the invitation to a speculation, and how can in a speculation you foreclose the way you want to go with definitions before. So that's why I had to leave this open. But I do think of that kind of AI that comes out of the AI that is used in self-driving cars, which probably some programmers would still consider a weak AI, instead of strong AI, since we teach it what to do and do not allow it to come to its own conclusions. I think it would go beyond this, and it would develop in the direction of a strong AI that, via deep learning, comes to its own conclusions, given well, learning from data. But not only, because I said before, we would give it some directions. So we would program it in a certain way. But please don't ask me for details. Technical concepts. If I had to answer them, I would never dare again to pick up such a topic as a philosopher.
Great. We have here 2 questions. After that, I want to make a thought experiment with you. So first, the lady here in front.
Thank you. My name is Anna Schroeder. I study technology and law. My question was about, it came back in kind of the whole talk. When you talked about the self-driving cars, you explained that maybe we will find universal laws and we will have to take like half Europe, half African information. And later when we were talking about the singularity topic and how AI will infiltrate into our lives. Also, that how we will respond as humankind, and it's difficult for me to explain this, but I really have the idea that you focus very much on this global perspective, how we will respond as humankind, and maybe the 4th law was that humans shouldn't be killed, and it might be replaced by climate, but that's just for a few countries maybe in the world. So how do you look at the smaller scale democracies, different countries? It just struck me as that you look so global, while no other topic in the world is managed like that. Why would AI be managed like that?
Okay. So yeah. So the question is, technology is applied in a closer environment, maybe in a more controlled environment, and so we don't need it to be universally valuable. No?
Yes. And do you expect that to happen, because there was so much focus on that?
Well, we can leave it open with the car. As I said, it's easy to adjust this via GPS to the laws that are there in certain countries. No? But I also said it's that we have to consider AI that not only drives for us but writes for us. And here we come to AI that thinks for us, no? That writes text for us, summarizes text, answers our questions at Google by summarizing all the answers, all the text, the sources that are there, and then answering it in a dialogical way. Google has presented this way of future of the search in May 2021. If you Google or whatever search engine you want to use for Lambda, that's the program. No? That's a language, it's a dialogue system. You ask the question like you ask your phone, like Siri, and Lambda will not quote from a certain site, but it will digest all the material it has to that question, and it will come up with a summary for you. So that is, and behind this is of course AI that processes all the data. And here now comes the question: will we have different lambdas in every country where Google is used? I don't know. I don't think so. I think that AI, when it is ready to be used, will be used in its field as broad as possible, because that's the interest of these companies behind it. They don't want to leave the market in Africa to China. So if Google can help it, it will want to have the market everywhere. And therefore, and then of course it is a problem with the perspective. There are papers in the now growing field of AI ethics research that you can Google for this also. GPT-3 has an American accent. So, and this is then used everywhere, no? Because the data on which GPT-3 is a language AI that writes text, no? And behind Lambda is actually such a program. It will bring its perspective, which it learned on the data it was fed with, everywhere where it is applied. And the data it is fed with normally come from Wikipedia or Reddit, or basically they are to a high percentage from white people. And on Wikipedia, it's even white men from the middle class, they say. So if you teach an AI on these kind of data, then of course you go with an American accent into the world and present then your perspective on whatever you have. And there are also experiments with this where they have such an AI, a GPT-3 that was trained on American data, summarizing a law in Australia for a more gun control. And in Australia, you have 14 guns per 100 people. In the United States, you have 120 per 100 people. And we know that the perspective in the United States on gun control is very different and very difficult, and no president has ever was ever successful after a new school shooting to implement laws that really forbid the trade with weapons. But in Australia, they want to go this way. They want to make it more difficult to buy weapons. So this GPT-3 AI now summarized the text from Australia that it will rid you of your freedom for self-defense, and you should consult your politician in your community to fight against it. So it changed completely the text because it was filled with American data. And that is one example. There are other examples when they talk about abortion, for example, no? Or about individual freedom. So therefore it is very important to think from the start on about this technology in a global scale. Namely that it is missing global data, because of course Europeans and Americans have a way bigger linguistic footprint on the internet than other cultures, let alone oral cultures that don't even write down things. No? So that is, of course, then not fair, and therefore one branch of the AI ethic research is called decolonizing AI. So people talk about a new way of colonizing, and it does not only mean that the AI producers, which are all white companies, no, in Silicon Valley and in China, then that they use the data from Africa or other not developed countries, and they take them like resources and they sell them back the manufactured products and the AI. No? It is not only this, but it is also that it's a kind of colonialization in terms of values, that we who are behind the AI, I should not say we, because Europe is not good in producing AI, the EU is way behind, but those who Google, for example, or China, they will bring their values with the AI in the world, and I think we should consider this as a problem very early. Even though you are right, we don't know how far it will then be globally used. But I think there's an economic incentive to use it as broad as possible once it is market tauglich. Ready to market, yeah.
Okay. We have a number of more questions. First, there was the gentleman behind. Would you still like to ask a question? Yeah.
Thank you very much. That was very interesting presentation. I really enjoyed it, even though I didn't know anything about this. My question is about artificial intelligence, relation between artificial intelligence and military complex. Nowadays, military is getting really technological developed, I would say. What do you think we are heading now at this moment? And I'm also interested if the government's using more and more artificial intelligence in their military complex.
In the military complex?
Yes, yeah. In wartime, and yeah.
Well, the question is what will be there first, no? The self-driving car or the autonomous weapon? And the war and military interest is always a driver for technology. The German media theorist Friedrich Kittler said that it's the military that is driving the technology, and then the civil area is just using the leftovers, or is actually misusing it then for its own interest. But the military has the money, of course, and the interest, and also the argument. If we don't do this, no, then it's all about safety. But I cannot answer this question. The discussion is going on whether autonomous weapons should be banned or not, and under what conditions they can be used. They say they cause less casualties, and of course for an AI on the battlefield, the same is true that what I said. It is not emotionally, it is not biased. It will do what it is told to do. So atrocities that we hear now that happen in all wars may not happen anymore. So that would be one argument in favor of using AI in this field. And but the main argument will be that everybody is producing it anyway, so to have it, and you would be unwise, and it would be like what is Verrat? It would be treason if you would argue for not doing it. Would be because you would bring your own country into a disadvantage. So I'm afraid that it will be developed. Yeah. And I think, but here again, it needs an international discussion, no? How to ban it, if that is possible, because we know in cases when it is likely to be used, these are cases when discussions are not possible anymore, and then you don't know how much a ban is still valid.
If it would be truly artificial intelligence, it would refuse to fight. But okay.
That's good.
I'm going to just want to invite you to help me with a thought experiment. You remember in the beginning of your talk, you also showed that artificial intelligence system would calculate the individual carbon footprint, or the amount of meat consumed, or how many air miles have already been used, and all of this flows into a big calculation of whether a person is actually in line with the ecological expectation of the time or not. This reminds me very much of the social credit system that has now started up in China, where everybody is basically forced to participate, and where the government and the private sectors are collaborating, and everybody's social credit determines actually what public care you get, on which travels you are allowed to do. Everything of your private life depends on your social credit. Now, the question is, when we want to really effectively combat climate catastrophe, we may actually need to also create targets for every individual and enforce them somehow, how much of resources they are entitled to. We also see in the media that there's a lot of discussion that especially the rich population consumes most of the fossil fuels and ecologic resources, whereas the bottom 80% of the world, of the population, are actually using very, very little. So my question to you is, first of all, would you personally agree to also have such a calculation that everybody is held to similar standards and that you are actually accountable for your own consumption. Would that be something you would agree to do in order to break this deadlock of climate activism and climate change measures? So those who would agree to have this calculation now without AI, can you please raise your hand? So that's kind of interesting because there is a big willingness to commit. Yeah? Would you also agree, those of you, that there is an enforceability attached to it, similar to the Chinese social credit system, that people actually feel consequences if they are exceeding their contingent of resources? Is that something you would also agree to? Or, yeah, a few, yeah, but there are a few hands. But yeah, but for the good cause, yeah, for ecology, and we want to preserve it. So in that case, would consequences be, yeah, okay. And would that be then also something that should be delegated to AI because it is much more, it's much better in calculating that and keeping track of everyone and also enforcing the sanction. And it would be probably less biased than a human system in that case. We don't talk about killing, yeah? We are not yet there. Okay, yeah, there are a few. So you see, it is actually something that seems kind of straightforward. How the consequences and what they are and how they are defined and how they will actually affect our lives, and if they actually become then in a way so burdensome as you are hinting at the end of the talk, that they become actually paternalistic and we are just in a white space where we are allowed to play, watched by graceful machines, yeah? That is then another scenario. But thank you for participating, and now we can have a few more questions, and in 10 minutes we wind down. Yeah, please, you, and then we go to the back. Yeah?
Thank you very much. My question is regarding the part with automated cars. Do you think, isn't it possible that it would do more harm applying these rules? For example, the 3 rules that you mentioned. The first rule was to avoid collision with a pedestrian at any cost. That would mean that, for example, it would take a person who, imagine, would have like killing intentions, and he would like jump to the road, and the car would follow the first rule, and he would like just kill the driver, and it would be like, you know, wouldn't it do much like more harm?
Yeah, well, that's a very interesting question, and I think you mean that person that jumps in front of the car does not have self-killing intentions, right? But it's a kind of terrorist who just wants to have the car kill around. No, he would kill the car because, of course, the car would also, by law, not be allowed to hit into other pedestrians. Yeah, that's probably possible, but I don't think that that will change anything in the discussion in a general way, because this would be considered an exception that you cannot control. But would you change the law of the car then, therefore, because it's possible that there are some people with terroristic intentions? Do we do this in society, or do we continue to live hoping, I mean, yes, I know we have now security control on the airport and so on, but we would have to go way further if we want to avoid every possibility of a terroristic act, and we don't do this. And therefore, I don't think that this discussion would stop because of this possibility of that person.
But this is a very interesting expansion of the your thought experiments. Thank you. Now we go to the back of the room, and we started with the last lady, please.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. So I'm really interested on your philosophical view on the notion of self-determination, which if we take into consideration that consumer product based on AI is actually the offer from corporations to us as a human, then we also take into consideration our rationality as a human being, our mind as a human being. And I'm pretty sure that there are already a lot of cases, for example, like self-driving car, there are already a lot of accidents to that, but I'm still seeing that actually us human see that self-driving cars is actually kind of like a luxury to our lives. So people tend to have that kind of desire to be able to have access to that car because they see that as a thing that would, somehow like increasing their level of quality of life. Then if the consumer product based on AI is offered by corporation to us as a human while taking into consideration right to self-determination, would you see that actually it's not the corporation who is taking over the decision of life and that of human, but it's on us who decided to consume that consumer product based on AI. So basically, we kind of like agree, yeah, it doesn't matter if that causes accident, it still can increase my quality of life. That's me exercising my right to self-determination. That's my rationality as a people who is the ability to access that luxury. That's my first question. So my second question would be related to the climate, right? I think a month or 2 months ago, there were a lot of farmers in the Netherlands who were protesting because of their farmland is planned to be taken over by Dutch government because of the carbon emission. Then my perspective, like my own perspective, is taking over someone's job over carbon emission. Yeah, I know like there are a lot of research that agriculture is a significant resources on carbon emission. But at the other hand, we are taking over someone's job, which also their right to live. What's your view on that, like from the philosophical perspective? Thank you.
Thank you. That's points to very important. It's actually one very important issue here, namely, can we continue with the cult of individualism? And that's a description that Emil Durkheim gave to describe modernity in 1890. He's a sociologist from France. And since then, we have increased this cult of individualism more and more. And it is one of the reasons why we have such difficulties now to save the planet, because it means that we reduce our liberty that we have started to like and to love and started to think we are entitled to it. It means that we have to reduce our liberty, be it driving the car myself or flying whenever I want, as long as I can afford it, money-wise. Having to reduce it because the society cannot afford it. And it's more than about money then. No, that's an argument of the Greens from the 80s. No, it's not the question if you can pay your electricity bill. It's the question whether we can use up so much resources, or whether we should all try to reduce it. And there are ways to do this, like we can produce products, cars that have less carbon emission. and the electric car is a kind of distraction in this field. It still needs to be produced. It still will fill the streets and so on. So it's not the turn in transportation that we really need. The turn what we really need is going away from individual traffic, but using a car when you need one, as we now do already in Berlin. It's very popular, such car sharing companies. But in the future, it will be that we will not write it ourselves. It will, the apps will tell us where there is a car driving from A to B, where we have to go, and maybe there are already people in there, but it will all work to our convenience. But we will not have the right to drive the car alone anymore. That would be a stipulation that the society would offer or enforce in order to reduce carbon emission. And clearly, yes, it is also a reduction of individual freedom, but we have to wake up. I mean, we cannot continue with our individual freedom if we really want to change something, and if we really want to, in terms of climate change, no? Then we need maybe a budget of miles that we can fly, or of square meter that we can claim for ourselves, in order to save resources. And it will hurt. It will hurt, but nowadays the discussion is, and now it becomes political. No? Discussion is, since politicians want to be re-elected after 4 or 5 years, they never say it this way. No? The Greens in Germany were claimed to be a Verbotspartei, no? But they are not right now. They are not. They do everything that you can use, that you don't have to reduce your gas consumption. No? They make it artificially cheaper than the market says. So, but what they should do is the other way around, which was also their concept before. No? But they were always punished for this and never got into the government. Now they are there, and now they change this because they are afraid that they are not elected again. And now I come to the real philosophical issue here. It's the democratic system that is in the way. Because they need to be re-elected, and because people have this present bias and think, I separate a little bit the trash and that will help, and then I take, I don't know, this self-betraying behavior, no? But I never do so much that it would hurt. So I don't move into a smaller apartment. I don't want to do this, no? And nobody will do this without if it's not enforced by law, for example. And now and because of this, Hans Jonas said in his book, The Principle of Responsibility, that was published in 1979, after the report of the Club of Rome and after the first huge discussion about these things, at the time when the Greens established themselves. He said that the real change can only come from a dictatorship, because democratic societies will be not be re-elected if they come up with unpopular decisions, and all these decisions will have to be unpopular, he said, because they reduce our individual freedom. So for him, of course, it was ironic. He was not a fan of the Soviet Union, but that's what he actually said, that only a dictatorship could really enforce ecological and a real ecological politic. And I don't know how to answer this question, but I know that in the last 5 years there's a huge discussion in political science going on about democracy and how democracy should be changed, because it is not the right means to do things that we actually need to do.
delegated to an expert committee. I would suggest that we take 2 more short questions and then we carry our discussion to the drinks, okay? And then we can still continue. So there's this question. Yes, please.
Right. Before you talked about the fact that most of the training data that goes into AI comes from males, and mostly white males, probably in Europe and in the States. If there's a way to kind of counterbalance that, what would be your suggestion? Would that be feeding more, overrepresenting women in that data?
Over more what? Wait a minute. Yes. Okay, there are several ways how to counter this. First is that you document the data you use so that you actually know where they are coming from and what possible biases they include. And this kind of documentation is not done because it's expensive and it's easier to just take data from where you get it easy, and that is Wikipedia and Reddit, and then just have the AI working on this. So that's the first problem. You have to document the data so that you know where the biases come from and what to do. Second is to balance. And balance would mean that the data have to represent reality in a proportional way, which it doesn't do because different groups have different linguistic footprint on the internet, and therefore their data are not included. And especially not in these platforms, then in Reddit and Wikipedia. So the second step would be you have to include the entire internet. But even that doesn't help because of the disproportionate presence of different cultures or different social groups on the internet. So you would have to rearrange this, like you do in a poll. No? If you know there are not enough old people here, then you count this more. You could do this, and that's still not enough. Some people say, and they call for algorithmic reparation. You can Google that too. These articles are all free, all online, and algorithmic reparation means it's based on critical race theory. It means that you should the data actually manipulate in a way that those who were not enough represented so far, that they are better, that they are more represented, so that the perspective of minor groups get a proportionally a bigger presence in the data set than they actually have in reality. So you would now not try to represent reality, the offline reality as it is. No, you would represent an idea of the reality as it should be, and then teach the algorithm, the AI, accordingly, so that it then speaks more politically correct than actually people on Earth do. Because if you leave it to the reality, and if the majority, since AI operates probabilistic and follows the statistic majority, then the majority would win. But then the minors would not be protected, or the minorities, no? Suppressed groups would not be protected. So that is actually what is discussed now. And, but that is a kind of making politics behind the doors, because you would need a discussion. It's a kind of positive discrimination or affirmative action, and that requires actually a democratic a process of democratic discussion, how far the society wants to go, and we cannot leave this to some AI programmers or people who collect the data. No? But it goes in this direction. There are people who say that we can use AI to better the world, basically. It's a kind of solutionism.
Thank you. And who wants the privilege of the last crisp question? Everybody ready for a drink? That sounds... There's a question, yay.
Yeah, sorry for asking 2 questions, but if there are no more. So, now it seems like we're, on the one hand, concluding that there is a dystopia at hand with AI being a dictator. On the other hand, a problem with our democracies. I'm just wondering, is it then a dystopia or maybe also a utopia that you're sketching in your talk?
That's a good question for the end. No? Well, I wanted to portray it as a utopia. No? I said that the assumed adversary, AI, becomes our ally, maybe by helping us to do what we have to do, reduce our consumption of resources and so on, and to save the climate. But of course, in terms of if it's an AI dictatorship, then it's difficult to call this an utopia. So I guess I have to leave it open, but I would not I don't want to just consider it as a dystopic prospect. Depends, after all, it always depends on how we use it. I think it has some utopic aspects in it, which does not outrule dystopic elements either. I think that's a good closing word, no? To leave it open at the end.
It is indeed a very good closing word. I would like to thank you again for spending time with us, and also I want to thank you for the questions and the nice discussions we could engage with. And I would like to ask you one last time to applaud for our guest speaker. Thank you, thank you. And with this, I open the bar and invite you all for a drink. So let's have more good talks over there.